You are listening to the Cresco Wealthcast, a podcast brought to you by Cresco Wealth Management of Wellington Altus Private Wealth. I'm your host, Dimitri Korolis, and I wanted to bring a podcast from the world of wealth that was really just easy to follow. And from time to time, I'm going to be bringing in members of the team. We'll be bringing in external guests and really providing some good information that are inspired from those coffee talk conversations that not just we're having, but that you're having as well. You can follow the podcast on www.cresco.podbean.com, or if you're on Spotify, you can just search for the Cresco Wealthcast. And last but not least, please do not forget to subscribe to my channel on Instagram, which is @TheFinanceGreek. All right, well, welcome back, everyone, to the Cresco Wealthcast. I'm joined today by one of the advisors on the team, Jennifer Williams, as well as our senior financial planner, Wayne DeBoer. Why we wanted to do this episode for this week actually really came from a presentation that the two of you had done, and that was how to prepare and to manage a loved one's finances, however that transition might look respective to the family. So great presentation. I thought let's bring it into a podcast, bring it out to the world. So Wayne, why don't I start with you on the overarching themes of what you were really talking about. We can dive a bit deeper as we go.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Dimitri. So Jennifer and I did have a chance to go through some of this together, and what we found was when we compare our collective experience, one of the best ways that we can prepare for this transition is to try to understand kind of that view from 30,000 feet, that high-level strategy about what our loved one has in place already. Ideally, you're stepping into this role before someone has lost capacity, and you can have these conversations with them. But I think the example that I like to use is when you open a map, you try to figure out where you are. And so when you understand strategy, it's really an opportunity for you to figure out where is your loved one on their journey of managing their finances, what's in front of them, and how do we chart a path forward.
Yeah, and Jennifer, I think for you, as long as I've known you, I mean, this has been a topic that you've just been very interested in as well. You did this presentation. I think you have another one coming in the summer as well. What inspired, I wouldn't say your focus, but what inspired you to really manage this? Was it just from personal experiences or just seeing what's there from clients?
It's been meeting with clients, and it has come up at a lot of meetings, and I feel that we help a lot of people right now that are in that sandwich generation, where we are caring for and raising for kids at home, and also our aging parents or loved ones are relying on us more.
Yeah, and it's a tricky time frame as well in an age, right, where you pivot, you're right. Why don't we let's get into a bit of the presentation. Where would you like to start? Is it maybe a high level approach to it, the big picture, if you will, and let's just let the conversation go.
Yeah, thanks, Dimitri. So, I think to understand strategy, obviously, if your parent can or your loved one can tell you what they're doing, that's the perfect spot to start. But in the absence of that, they often have other advisors, other people that they're working with who've helped them understand strategy, implement it, things like that. So really, I mean, I would want to get to know some of those people if I were stepping into this role. Who are these people? Lawyers. The ideal thing about sitting down to meet with your loved one's lawyer is you can figure out things about, where are the wills? What do they say? Is this what your parents want? Understand other strategy that's been put in place legally when it comes to things like how they own assets. What do they own? Are they in business with other people? Are there shareholders agreements, things like that are really going to factor into all of the planning that I might have to step into at some point in time when I take over responsibility for my parents or my loved ones' finances. So that's one of the places I would start. And once I've had that conversation, I think really what I would like to do is get to know their accountant, their tax advisor, to understand their tax planning that they've done so far. One of the reasons this relationship I think is so important is someone's accountant is the one who understands all of their tax slips. They've been filing the returns. They know who the payers are. So if they have an account with the bank that's paying, interest on a savings account, they can see that. Now you know where there's assets. Now you can understand how is your loved one's income created. Do they have enough income to meet their expenses? And then also just some other practical things that come into this. We all around this table here have kind of seen this where maybe someone has not been filing their taxes for a while. This conversation is your opportunity to make sure that someone has been doing their taxes, because your tax return is not just how you figure out how much money you get to pay the government. It also gives you eligibility for certain benefits. So let's make sure that we're getting, the guaranteed income supplement if someone's eligible. Let's make sure we're getting old age security. Let's make sure we're getting the GST credits and any other tax credits and payments that you might be entitled to. Because it's really easy when someone ages for them to start to think, I don't owe any money to the government. Why would I bother filing this return? And then once that's done, and sorry, I feel like I'm talking here a little while, where I'd probably go next is to sit down with their investment advisor, with their wealth planning team. Because most of the time, I think that's the person who's typically creating their paycheck. This is your chance to understand things like, where is my mom or my dad's income coming from? What types of accounts do they have? You can start to have conversations around things like investment mixes and things like that with their advisor to make sure that everything's appropriate for them.
That's a great point. And Jennifer, to that, you see it how often? What are people typically missing?
Well, what we find is during the accumulation years and working years and saving years, wants, needs, goals, they can be different and they vary among clients. But really, as you get into the decumulation years, which is typically retirement, your wants and needs they converge and become very, very similar. This space has limited options, so it really is about optimizing efficiencies. So, Wayne mentioned making sure that if someone's eligible to get, the GIS supplement or OAS supplement, we want to make sure that things are running very tax efficiently from the portfolio side. And we want to make sure we're covering off the withdrawal strategies for them as well. I like to say that your portfolio becomes part of your job in retirement, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And so it's interesting because we end up becoming really the quarterback for a lot of these conversations. And Wayne, you're saying talking to a lawyer, talking to an accountant. And yes, part of that should actually be, in the case of Jennifer, talking to the investment advisor. But we're doing a lot of that quarterbacking because I say outside of doctors, lawyers, and ourselves, I think no one else gives that much personal information. So we're holding all this info that is important. So having that, what I'm reading is family office, even these open conversations of what's happening as well. What else are we seeing, Wayne?
Just a continuation of that, I think it's very easy for information to become siloed, and having these conversations starts to break down some of those walls, starts to let that information be a little bit more known across the professional advisor group. And I know internally we have a very open concept when it comes to sharing information with advisors, but I think in my experience that's not always the case in the industry. And just to the point too, because people sometimes keep information to themselves, I think it's important for us in our role to acknowledge we don't know your loved one in the same way that you do. So if someone's a client of ours, let me rephrase that. If someone's a client of ours and their child is going to step in to manage their finances, we obviously have a different relationship dynamic with their parent. But just because we know them in a different way doesn't mean we don't know things about them that the child might not know themselves already. So here's an opportunity for a conversation, for us to share strategies that we've been working on with them, working on with their accountant, and just to make sure that when someone steps in, you don't just suddenly create a whole new strategy that forgets everything that's been worked on over the last 5, 10, 15 years.
Right, very important. That's a good point.
So as parts of these conversations, and I think we're going to touch on this in a little bit too, just looking at things like beneficiary designations and whatnot. Again, I think maybe we'll come back to this in a little bit, but here's your chance to talk to these advisors and figure out what's in place, because there's going to be more work ahead of you. And if you understand at this stage kind of what that big strategy, high level strategy is, when you step into the day to day, it's going to be much easier because you'll be able to connect the dots. So,
And is it time to add a trusted contact to an account? You know, as of a couple of years ago, we are able to add a trusted contact to an account for a loved one. And it doesn't have to be a family member either, right? It can be someone that really knows you and your values well and is familiar with your support network, you know, whether it's your kids, family, close friends. You know, it's us, it protects the client, right? So we're able to give some information to the trusted contact on the account if we're starting to see some transactions on the account that are unusual or just some out of character behaviors when we're talking to the client. So it really is to prevent, you know, financial exploitation if we see any mental capacities that may arise.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I don't know where you two want to pivot here, but you know, preparing to manage a loved one's finances could be incapacity. That's great. It's open and you know, say our parents or our families say, yeah, here you go, everyone, you do what you do and meet me at the finish line. But then there is that case where you're talking about illnesses and whether it be Alzheimer's, dementia, it could be anything. The trusted contact, how does it relate to things like that? Just to show how powerful it can be of that new addition, Jennifer.
Yeah, and the trusted contact, as I say, it doesn't have to be a family member, and it should maybe be different than the power of attorney, you know, because you're not so much involved in those day-to-day financial decisions. But you know, as I say, you're close with the client. You should be comfortable speaking with a wealth advisor, and it's really about getting everyone at the table for the client. That's the most important thing. You know, when we bring on a new relationship and we start reaching out to their accountant, sometimes the accountant, you know, is a bit surprised to hear from us, but it's just how we operate, right? We really want to bring everyone to the table and have them aware of what we are planning, what we're doing, how we're running the portfolio, whether it's a corporate account or, you know, their personal non-registered accounts. And when they are used to hearing from us throughout the year, once a year, they really enjoy the relationship as well.
So yeah, Dimitri and Jennifer, like up until this point, you're kind of stepping in to be like an orchestra conductor, right? Like you're figuring out who's playing the different instruments, and now it's your job to make them all kind of work together. And then once you have some of that high level stuff figured out, you can start focusing on some of the other roles involved in managing this person's finances.
So perfect. And so I like it. It's we provide a high level, things that we need to look on both ends. And what about day to day? What if we could transition a little bit and say, okay, thank you, Cresco. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Wayne. Heard what you're saying, but what do I do now? What are some steps that I can take or some actionable items out of the podcast? And we'll start with Wayne. You're just closer. So
yeah, I think it's just some financial planning basics here. Like we want to understand cash flow.
Of course, you go financial planning.
Of course I would. It's right on brand. So like, Now, what's the way to do this? Because I know not everybody keeps a budget month to month. So how I would start, honestly, is I would say to my parent, to my loved one, I would say, can you collect your mail for 2 or 3 months? I want to see your bank statements and your credit card statements.
Okay.
I still pay those bills in the meantime, but let's collect the bills and let's figure out what your outflows are, what your inflows are over a few months. I can now compare that with the information that I have from the accountant, the financial planner, see if things are lining up. Because day to day, your cash flow is going to be king. With that, you'll start to see things like credit card statements, line of credit statements, if there's mortgages, things like that. Because then you can understand what are the assets, what are the debts, how do I pair these off?
Okay.
Why is this interesting to me at this stage? Because I'm starting to think, although this is day to day, longer term, we might need things like cash balances, lines of credit for, care expenses. What if a wheelchair is needed? What if some sort of other assisted living devices are required or in-home care? how will these types of things be funded? So let's start to understand that day-to-day inflows, outflows, cash available, debt that we need to stay on top of. And then when we start thinking longer term, we know what base we have behind us for that.
You know, that's a good point. And I think if not everyone listening or here has maybe a personal experience, but we can all attest that, or some of us can attest that at the very least, going back and looking for stuff is a pain in any capacity, whether it's an estate document, whether I would add even tax returns. If you're going to go in the mail, knowing where the tax returns are year to year, just documents in general, because that's not fun to try to retrieve and then phone people and or however it looks. So I can't stress that enough. Good point. I give you a little flack, but you got it, Wayne. You're 1 for 1.
And because it's interesting what you find sometimes. So recurring gym memberships, bill payments for things that someone doesn't use anymore. And it's way easier to deal with those things while your loved one can make the call themselves than for you to try to say, hey, I'm acting as power of attorney for my mom. I want this gone. People might not know what that means or how they deal with you. It's just way easier to deal with things now. And another thing that I actually have seen with families in the past too is just making sure that people are on top of their debts. Like I've had clients in the past where they might just pay $500 or $1,000 or $2,000 against their credit card here or there. Well, that doesn't necessarily line up with what the balance is. So they could have a whole bunch of cash sitting on the side, but still running credit card balances because they're just not paying attention in the same way that they used to. So here's our chance to see what's going on with mom and dad's, banking, make sure they're staying on top of it. They're not paying for stuff they don't need or that they won't use, or they're not paying interest charges unnecessarily if they have enough cash for it. So let's take a look at some of those things now.
It also comes back to family meetings, communication with your loved ones, right? I'm big on family meetings, not that I'm able to get my family to the table quite yet. Generations are different so the family meetings are, they can look very differently, right? They can be annually, maybe they're every 6 months, maybe they're very short over a dinner, Sunday dinner. And they can also, they can cover a wide range of topics. The portfolio reviews were mentioned, an estate or will review. Is the executor on the will, totally outdated from 15 years ago? Is that executor able to take on that role? Is there a family business update that needs to happen? And, just finding out where some of the property or debts maybe are. So there's lots of different things to chat about. And one, with the planning and health coverage, right? Like what do your loved ones want? It's so important to know their goals for how they envision their healthcare, and then you have to kind of that circles back to planning. How is that all going to be paid for? Because there's a huge range in costs there.
Yeah, I was going to say, going back, I chuckled when you said family meeting. For us, it's about 4 hours into Easter. And the neighbors can hear us
over the lamb.
Yeah, over the lamb. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. What are some other things day to day? Let's say off the checklist. These are great ideas and communication, planning, just little things. You're right, Jennifer. Healthcare coverage, benefits, the mail, understanding what's going on, and looking at those. Oh, so you're still carrying the Disney Plus subscription?
Yeah. Some other practical things like, day to day, while your loved one can tell you about these things and can act on these things, are your driver's licenses up to date? Are your passports up to date? Things like that we need to look at. We don't want to, let those things go by and realize we've forgotten to go to the registry office and update that. And then finally, like one last thing that I think I'll pick on here is everybody's involved in, social media, email accounts, you name it, no matter one's age anymore. Mm-hmm. Let's ask them if they mind keeping a password log, like, make a logbook, email accounts, ID, like, login IDs, passwords, things like that, so that later on you can step in and manage some of these things, wrap up accounts, make sure passwords are secure enough so we don't have to worry about, any sort of account thefts or things like that. But let's look at those things at the same time.
That's a good one. I can say, recently I had to do that with a friend of mine as well. And having the passwords was massive to be able to retrieve like a lot of information. And Jennifer, I think you were going to mention something as well here. Sorry to cut you
Well,
off.
I know as we're kind of getting towards the end here, I think it is important that I end on just prioritizing your own self-care. It can be very stressful. Planning for your own retirement also while helping your loved ones and aging parents. So just make sure you have your own solid retirement plan in place and that you are meeting with your own wealth advisor. And if you don't have one, call us.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, we'll take those conversations. Contact Jennifer, contact Wayne, contact us here at Cresco because, we want to provide a high level, some good actionable items that people can take with them. But the truth is the devil's in the details. Everyone is a little bit different. Every situation is a little bit different between communication levels, family dynamics, whatever the case may be. But a conversation, it's just there to have. And then it can, bring those next questions.